Oh my goodness, right. We have so much to talk about. So when I find out I was chatting to you, I was very excited. Hazard is one of my favorite songs of all time. So I play it on Smooth regularly, and I always get really excited when we play it. So very excited to chat to you. And I know that you've got millions of other songs, but that is my personal favorite. I love it. Have you got
That's my wife's favorite song too, actually.
Ah, you see, you've got good taste. That's what it is.
Yes.
You decided to make the move to Los Angeles when you were 18 years old, 17, 18. What happened to make you make that move?
Well, when I was about 15, I started writing songs. Up until that point, I always wanted to be a singer, always wanted to be a star, always wanted to be, I wanted to be a rock star. But I wasn't, I just thought I would just make it as a singer, hopefully, and I would need material. And then when I was about 15, I just decided that the albums that I had been listening to incessantly, from Billy Joel's The Stranger to Elton John's Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player, to Paul Simon's Still Crazy After All These Years, I was like, what am I doing? I need to write songs. Well, I was 15. And so my songwriting was all based upon girls I had crushes on in school. But I was pretty, I wore my heart on my sleeve, and I had deep crushes, and in my mind they were love affairs. And so I wrote songs about these girls. And
do they know that they were written about?
One or two of them didn't help me score at all. But I had put together about 4 or 5 of my best songs and recorded them. So they were pretty decent band demos. And that tape, it was a cassette tape, went from a friend of mine to a friend of his, to a guy he knew, who worked at the time with the Commodores. And they gave it to Lionel Richie. And I don't know why. I still to this day don't know why. Neither does he. Neither does Lionel. Because he got tapes all the time. He was other than Michael Jackson, he was the biggest star in music in 1980, 80 or whatever it was. He listened to my tape and liked it, and my phone number was written on the back of the cassette in pencil, and he called the number and at my parents' house, and he talked to me for, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. He was so encouraging and complimentary. And I was going into my senior year of high school at that point, and he said, I don't want your parents to kill me to dissuade you from going to college, but you really got the goods, man. You should just come out to LA and see, get to work and see what you can accomplish. And so a year later, I was out of high school. I moved to LA, and he gave me a job singing background vocals on his first solo album. And I started singing on hits like You Are. And then I did the second album too. So I sang on All Night Long and Running with the Night. And
do you make it into the video?
No, I did not make it into the video. But what he gave me, aside from a job, and so I could make a little bit of money singing on his record. Lionel invited me to, as he put it to me one night early in the process, he said, whenever I'm here, meaning in the studio, he said, whenever I'm here, you're welcome to be here. Whether you're singing or not, you can just come and hang out and watch and learn. Imagine what a gift that was. Here I was 18 or 19 years old, basically going to hit record school, watching a master at work, and watching how because he produced his records too with a wonderful producer named James Carmichael, watching their interaction as co-producers, watching how they dealt with the musicians, watching arrangements come together, watching their choices of instrumentation, everything that you could possibly need to know about making a record, particularly a hit record. I just sat and absorbed like a sponge.
Wow.
And
what an amazing mentor to have.
Yeah. And I just can't stress enough how his graciousness and kindness changed the trajectory of my life. He was just, to this day, and I feel really lucky that we're still friends. And every once in a while I just text him and I go, have I thanked you lately for my career?
Oh, that's so nice. So what an incredible thing. You hear about so many people that move to LA, they want to be a star, and They probably don't have any opportunity like that, especially nowadays with so many people chancing it. You know, what an amazing opportunity you had. But then he obviously recognized your talent.
I think it was definitely a combination of events. And, you know, I've seen variations of it happen with certain people, but he really just took me under his wing. I completely forgot until recently something that's, I think, is really important, which is a couple of months before I got on the plane to move to LA, he was ending his time at the Commodores, and they were doing one last tour. And my parents decided to drive about 3 hours to see his concert, and I flew home because I wanted to go with them to the show. And they'd never met him before, but they knew that I was going to go out to LA and hopefully do some work with him. After the concert, I mean, they played to like 20,000 people. It was huge. After the concert, instead of going out with his friends or going back to his hotel room to rest, whatever, he went to the hotel room where my parents had booked for the night and sat on the floor of their hotel room for 2 hours, basically just saying, I'm going to look out for him. You don't have to worry. You know, he's got to grow up and do his thing like anybody else, but I'm not going to let anything happen to him. I mean, this was at the stardom. I mean, that's what kind of guy Lionel Richie is.
Now, I know that we've talked about your book, because you have got a book which is fabulous. It touches on all the stories, and in a very 2021 way. I don't actually have a physical copy of the book because it's all embedded in my computer right here. However, there are some great anecdotes when we were talking about meeting the diva that is Madonna, but you also met Whitney Houston. And I love the story you tell in there about meeting Whitney Houston. When was that in your career that you met her?
That was later. It was in the 90s, probably in, I would say maybe 1996 or 7. Actually, you could tell, you could look it up exactly, because it was, when we met in this hallway of a studio, I was working in one room, she was working in another. We literally bumped into each other in the hallway, and we were alone. It was just the two of us, and she was so sweet, and we gave each other a big hug. And I'd never met her. I'd never, you know, I passed her in the hallways or on, you know, on stages at award shows and stuff like that. I certainly was a fan of hers, but she was so sweet, and we were really happy to finally run into each other. And she confided to me that she was pregnant with Bobby Christina. So it would be, I mean, she had just found out she was pregnant. So it was 7 months before, or you know, 9 months, obviously. But I don't think she was telling anybody at first. I think so. It was probably 6 or 7 months before Bobby was born.
You obviously have written as well. I mean, you've written a lot of your own music, but you also have written for many other people as well. How did that happen? Is that something that you just writing so many songs for yourself that you end up kind of like saying, would anyone else like one of these? I have so many.
I mean, there is a little bit of that, I suppose, but you know, it started before I had a record deal. I was making a living as a background singer, as I mentioned, but I then, again, thanks to Lionel Richie, Lionel recommended me as a background singer to Kenny Rogers. And this is in 1983, when Kenny Rogers was still a massive star and big record seller. And so I really I just had the job singing on his record. But, you know, luckily for me, I was booked for 2 days in a row. And I did the first session. Everybody was pleased with what I sang and did. But on that session, I overheard Kenny mention to his producer that he needed a song for the record. He didn't say it to me. He didn't know I wrote songs. And I knew I had a session with him again the next day. And so that night I went home to my apartment and I wrote a song called Crazy, and came in the next day, and on a break from the vocal session, I nervously approached Kenny Rogers. I remember I was shaking, my knees were shaking, my hands were shaking, because, by the way, this is a really good way for the background singer to get fired.
Oh, gosh.
You know, you're hired as a background singer on a big star's record, and the background singer comes up to the artist and goes, "Hey man, I've got a song, I'm a songwriter." He's going to get his ass thrown out of the building. I don't know why they didn't throw my ass out of the building, but Kenny Rogers just looked at me and said, "Well, let me hear it." And he let me play it for him on the piano, and he really liked it. And boom, my songwriting career took off. And that song became #1 country song.
Oh my God. Wow. That's amazing.
So the
That's
answer to your question is, then, I had Kenny Rogers on my resume, and now I was starting to get, some good cuts as a songwriter. So I wrote with Philip Bailey, and I wrote with, a bunch of different people. And I started slowly but surely getting songs recorded. When I started having my own hits, I just never thought of stopping that. I never thought, well, now I have a record deal, so I'm only going to write songs for myself. I love writing songs for other people. I just like writing songs, and wherever they land, they land.
We've talked about Kenny Rogers, we've talked about Whitney, and we've talked about some amazing stories. And in your book, there are some truly wonderful stories. And I didn't quite realize the relationship you had with Luther Vandross. And I just think the story is very touching of how Dance with My Father came about. Would you mind telling that?
Well, I met Luther in the early 90s at an American Music Awards show, backstage. And I was a big fan of his, and he was really sweet to me, and it was a little mutual admiration society backstage for a minute. And we exchanged phone numbers. And there was something, sometimes it's like you just hit it off with somebody immediately. You just feel like, oh, this is a person I'm going to hang out with. We started talking on the phone. We were both touring. Literally, we both went from that American Music Awards show in LA back to the road. He was on tour, I was on tour. And so we found ourselves calling each other at night after our shows, just to kind of get to know each other and hang out on the phone. And we just became pals. And then a few months later, we were both off the road, and he came to my house with my ex-wife, and I think my youngest son, Brandon, my oldest son, Brandon, had just been born. And we just developed a friendship over time. We didn't work together that much the first couple of years. He sang background vocals on a couple of my records, which was amazing. He offered to do that, so I took him up on that. He sang on Keep Coming Back and some other tracks. But then a year or two later, he asked me to write a song with him he did a Christmas album, his first and only Christmas album. And so we wrote the single from that. It was called Every Year, Every Christmas. And it was so easy to write songs together because I wrote music and he wrote lyrics. So, he was capable of writing it all, as I am, but it was just an easy fit. And then we wrote another song, I think a year or two later, on a different album. Beautiful song, actually, called Isn't There Someone? But it was never a single or anything like that. And then in 2003, he rang me up one day. We were in touch all the time. But he rang me up and he said, I got an idea for a song, and only you can write it with me. And it's called Dance with My Father. All he had was the title. And he told me kind of what he wanted it to be about. I went off and wrote some music, sent it to him. He loved it. He, cut and pasted, and he had so many lyrics. And my original melody was not a lot of notes. There was longer notes, because to hear Luther's voice hold a note was just heaven. So he said, look, I got to just break these verses up a little bit because I've got a lot to say. There's too many words. And so he changed the verse melody a little bit, but it was, again, effortless. And he went in the studio and recorded it 10 days before he had the stroke that ultimately took him from us. It was the last song he ever recorded, and I think the last song he ever wrote. I do remember, though, him calling me and knowing he thought it would be a hit. I've never used that word for any song. I've never written a song and thought, oh, this is a hit. Luther really felt like Dance with My Father would be a hit, but more importantly, he said, this is the most important song of my life. He referenced Piano Man, Billy Joel's Piano Man. He said, this is my Piano Man. This is my signature song. This is what I'm going to sing for the rest of my life. This is how I'm going to be associated. And I think had he lived, it still would have been the same situation. Yeah. Because it really has touched so many people. I obviously have bittersweet emotions about the whole thing. I'm thrilled. You know, we won the Grammy for Song of the Year, and he lived to see that. I have people, I would say not a week goes by where someone doesn't mention that song to me and how much they love it and how much it means to them. And so I'm really grateful that we wrote the song together and that it was so successful. But as long as it's been, I miss him. He was one of my best friends. I miss him every.
Yeah. Well, it is a beautiful, beautiful song. Interesting as well that you say that that's his piano man. What's your piano man?
Right Here Waiting, I think, is probably, I mean, I can't imagine that. I mean, there was some of the other songs were really successful, but never on a global level like Right Here Waiting. Like even now, I have a granddaughter who just turned 12, and her friends know that song.
Yeah.
And that goes, hey, this is my grandpa. This is like, she goes, yeah, everybody knows that song. Even kids, little kids know that song. And they learn how to play the piano, playing bum, 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 bum. That's just, you know, I sort of stand in awe of that song because it took me 20 minutes to write. I never thought
it took you 20 minutes to write it. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I never thought, again, I thought it was a good song, but it was meant to be a statement that I made at that time to, you know, the woman I was in love with. And I didn't think much more about it than that. And then I just saw it become a massive hit, obviously, back in the day, but then it just never went away. It just, you know, I on Instagram, I follow #Richard Marx because I'm an egomaniac, and 90% of the people who hashtag me on Instagram are doing covers of Right Here Waiting. Amazing. You know, they're doing guitar, they're playing it on their flute, they're singing it in a choir. They're, you know, it's just like every day there's countless covers of Right Here Waiting. And so I'm very proud to be part of us, you know, to have written a song that I know is that ubiquitous.
Oh, Richard, it's been such a lovely opportunity to chat to you. Oh, I know that your book's out, your album's out. You've got it's an amazing actually album as well because it's like a double disc with greatest hits and also songs that you've collaborated with other people on as well. So it's brilliant from that point of view. But also the memoir is out as well, and you go into some of the stories that you've shared with us here. But also there are many other stories in there too. So thank you for talking with me today. I really appreciate it. My pleasure, and I'll see you in person next fall. Well, we look forward to that. I will be coming to see you then. Cannot wait. Thank you, Jenni.